Hey guys, this is Jan for Chess24 and we're gonna take a look at the fourth game of the World Cup final between Sergei Karjakin and Peter Svidler. It's been a dramatic final with two exhausted opponents, Peter Svidler winning the first two games, the second one due to a huge blunder by Sergei Karjakin, but then in the third game Svidler repaid the compliment and blundered himself, leading to a 2-1 and Karjakin's first win. That means that in this fourth game, Karjakin with the white pieces has a chance to equalize the score, which would mean if Karjakin were to win this game that the players would play a rapid tiebreak. Karjakin goes for one knight f3, changes tune from his 1e4 in the second game, and Svidler plays the move d5. Karjakin answers this with d4, and here we already see a little move order trickery. If Karjakin were to go 1 d4, it's very likely Peter Svidler would go for his favorite Grunfeld defense with knight f6, c4, g6. But after 1 knight f3, d5, now he's committed to the move d5. Here you can't really play the Grunfeld anymore, therefore Karjakin tries to transpose to the Queen's Gambit, where he figures Svidler is not an expert. Of course, Svidler was aware of this move order and prepared a surprising return, the very rarely played move 2c5, trying to open the position, and Karjakin knows his theory, plays the one move that is supposed to give white a bit of an edge, the move c4, blowing up the center and making sense of his extra move. Here black has a couple options. e6 would transpose to the Tarrasch defense, which is not very popular at top level. D takes c4 is a sideline of the Queen's Gambit accepted when white chooses between d5 and e3, both with a small edge as far as I can tell, while Svidler goes for a third option, the very direct c takes d4. White doesn't have anything better than c takes d5, maintaining more or less symmetry with an extra tempo. One trick worth knowing here is that black should not go queen takes d5 because of knight c3. And you can't take that knight, therefore you lose another tempo with the queen, which is not ideal. Therefore Svidler plays a move knight to f6, leaving white a choice how he wants to capture on d4. Both queen d4 and knight d4 are possible. Knight d4, knight d5 is a theoretical line. e4, white is a tad better, but it's quite playable for black. Karjakin plays the main move instead, the move queen takes d4, when once again Svidler restores the symmetry with queen takes d5. Here white has to make use of his extra tempo, and of course he does. He goes knight c3, attacking the black queen, forcing black to break the symmetry, because knight c6, queen takes d5 would not be a great idea. Therefore you have to take on d4, knight takes d4, and after only 7 moves we reach an endgame which might look equal at first sight, but it's not so simple. The pawn structure is equal, but white's extra move does count here. He's threatening, or here's the idea of going knight db5, threatening a check here, which is quite inconvenient for black to meet. He also has the idea of gaining space in the center very quickly with e4, e5. And one third quite common plan is to go for a fianchetto of this bishop with g3 and bishop g2, playing like in the Catalan opening, hoping this bishop can exert some pressure on the black queen side. Therefore this line is not so simple, but of course it's been part of Peter Svidler's preparation. He plays a rare move here. He plays the move bishop d7. The most common move is the move a6 in this position, just to stop white from going knight db5. Bishop d7 allows knight db5, and of course that's what Karjakin does, threatening a check, but of course it's not going to be overlooked. The point is that this forces a concession from black. Black could parry it with knight to a6, but this knight is really badly placed on the a6 square, stopping black from challenging the white knight with a6, and it doesn't have a lot of prospects itself. So knight a6 is not a pretty move to make, and Svidler goes for the alternative king d8. Also not pretty, losing the right to castle, but this at least gives black the option to chase away the knight with a6. And Karjakin's next move is a very strong move directed against this very option, the move bishop to e3. If now black were to play a6, he would lose because of bishop b6 check, followed by knight c7, so can't do that yet, and therefore Svidler goes knight to c6, when once again a6 is on the table, because now the rook has a square on b8. In this position, well, there's not many games, but the move that has been seen in most of them is the move h3, directed against black going knight g4, and also planning to gain some space on the king side, to go g4 and then bishop g2, put this bishop on the long diagonal, which, yeah, exerts some pressure on the black position, but I'm sure Svidler was prepared for this move. The main line here And Karjakin plays a novelty, at least as far as I can tell, the move f3, with similar ideas, covering g4, maybe preparing g4, but blocking this diagonal so that a bishop on g2 would not have the desired impact. Here, a6 is the first move that comes to mind, but then white once again manages to put some pressure with this maneuver, which, yeah, the position is not clear, but does look a bit unpleasant for black. So no surprise Svidler doesn't go for that, but the move he does go for is a huge surprise. Best move, in my opinion, and according to the computer, is the move king to c8, sidestepping this bishop b6 check and now threatening to go a6, when it seems like black is more or less okay. The game continues, white is maybe a tad better, but it looks like this position is totally playable for black. Svidler didn't want to allow g4 apparently. He went to huge extremes to prevent it. He played the move h5, which, yeah, it's just not a good move. It shouldn't be a priority in this position to stop g4. Also by h5 he does weaken the g5 square, apart from giving white a tempo, so h5 really was asking for trouble. And we can, yeah, I don't know, there's quite some mistakes in these final games and quite some to come, but keep in mind the players are extremely tired and under a lot of stress, so it's very understandable. I did not like the move h5. Long castle is very logical, king to c8 now, once again preparing a6, but Karjakin makes use of black's h5 and plays a very strong bishop to g5. The bishop has done his job on e3, can no longer go to b6 with check, so now it goes to g5, where it can't be challenged anymore by h6. And in doing so, it also manages to prevent the move a6, which is what Svidler overlooked from afar when going h5, that here knight to a4 is a massive problem. A takes b5, knight b6 check, king b8, knight takes a8, king takes a8, bishop takes f6, and white wins the exchange because the bishop on d7 is loose. So you can't go a6, and if you can't, then it's already very hard to free yourself. White has lots of natural moves to follow it up, like e4. Svidler tries to get his pieces out by going g6, planning to go bishop h6, but g6 has a tactical drawback and Karjakin exploits that immediately. Maybe you guys spotted it already. There's a petite combinaison, the move knight d6 check. This knight has to be taken because else it would capture on f7. After e takes d, bishop takes f6, white has transformed the pawn structure especially hugely to his favor. The pawn on d6 is a target, it's an isolated pawn. It's going to be weak forever. The white pieces are more active and black has trouble with his king. It's very hard to coordinate the rooks and it's going to take quite some moves to free his forces. So all things considered, black is very clearly worse here and the opening did not turn out well for Svidler. Rook g8, e4. Still the game continues and Svidler manages to defend very well for the next couple moves. He goes for the move bishop to e6, stopping bishop c4. King to b1, king to d7. Not a pretty move to make, stepping into this pin, but it had to be done to defend this pawn and to have a chance to coordinate his pieces by going bishop to g7. Here Karjakin had a choice. He plays the most natural move, the move knight to d5, centralizing this knight, keeping all the pluses off his position. The alternative was a more tactical e5, but I guess Karjakin didn't want to take that chance, because if he does not manage to win immediately here or win a pawn immediately, then by e5 he gives up some of his positional pluses by exchanging this weak black pawn. For example, rook e8, e takes d, bishop f5 check, king a1, rook to e6. And it looks like black is still very much alive by capturing this pawn next. So knight to d5, I like that decision, maintaining all the pluses. And Svidler tries to exchange the bishops by bishop to g7. Here Karjakin had a choice between three bishop moves, bishop g5, bishop h4, and bishop takes g7. The weakest one would have been bishop g5, surprisingly, because now black is in time to go f5, if knight to f4. Keep that in mind for the line we're going to see in a minute. Bishop to f7, and black seems to be more or less alright, because after ef, gf, white cannot continue putting pressure with bishop d3 so easily, because this bishop on g5 is a little misplaced. Knight d4 followed by bishop e5, and black is still alive. But very strong would have been the move bishop to h4 instead. Now if black tries the same thing, same line, f5, knight f4, bishop f7, takes, bishop d3, knight d4. This bishop is much better placed, goes to f2, immediately threatens bishop d4 and bishop f5. And the black position is on the verge of collapsing. Therefore, after bishop h4, black probably can't play f5, but then his position is just utterly sad. White keeps developing, bishop to b5, has the option of grabbing the two bishops with knight f6 whenever he feels like. Still this weakness on d6, which can be targeted with bishop g3. So this position does look really, really bad. But Karjakin decided to exchange the bishops instead, which gives Svidler some more hope because, well, now at least the material is reduced. If he manages to exchange his knight as well, he does have pretty decent drawing chances. Karjakin decides to fight against knight, bishop takes d5, goes bishop b5, developing, very natural. Svidler plays an ugly but strong move, the move king to d8. He needs the option of capturing this guy, and therefore he has to step out of the pin so that e takes d5 does not win a piece. Rook to d2, logical move, allowing bishop takes d5. Could argue that maybe Karjakin should have kept this knight, knight e3, king e7, and he's still a bit better, but nothing obvious is in sight. The remaining two black minor pieces actually work quite well there. Rook d2, bishop takes d5, rook takes d5, now e takes d is pointless, the knight just goes somewhere. So rook takes d5, king to c7, and looks like the worst is over for black. He's still worse, he still has his weakness, the bishop is still a bit stronger than the knight, but he manages to coordinate his pieces to easily defend his weakness, and this position does look quite holdable, to use a chess term. Rook to c1, pinning, and rook to e8, another strong move, planning more exchanges by going rook to e5. Rook to d4, sidestepping the coming rook e5, but it's gonna come anyway. Rook to e5, attacking this bishop and preparing rook c5. I guess with rook d4, Karjakin was planning to go bishop c6, bc, and rook c4 here, but upon closer inspection it turns out that after c5, black holds the position, manages to generate enough counterplay in the lines I was looking at. For example, b4 here. Now black should not count material, but just go for f5, b takes e5, and d5. E takes d5, rook takes d5, and this position is very close to draw because all of a sudden black is very, very active. Now the try instead of b4 would have been f4, attacking the rook, rook to e6, and e5, trying to break the black pawn chain this way. But here black is another way to activate the move g5. Once again, he might lose a pawn short term, but he does get it back actually. G takes f4. Even though the black structure is ugly, with both these rooks so active, this position should be a draw as well. So therefore, Karjakin did not exchange his bishop, went for bishop a4. But that allows Svidler to safeguard his queenside for now, go b5, bishop b3, rook c5, exchanging another pair of rooks, or well, one pair of rooks. So first one, rook d5, rook takes c1, king takes c1, a6, and the position is stabilized. White is still better, the bishop is still a bit superior to the knight, pawn on d6 is still weak, but with all his weaknesses defended, black should be able to hold this position. Rook to d3 was played, Karjakin was in some kind of time trouble here, only like 7-8 minutes left for 12 moves. So he tries to play quickly and was going to repeat moves actually a couple times. We're going to see that in a minute to get closer to the time control. After rook d3, I believe Svidler misses a chance to make his life considerably easier by playing the move f5 here. Once again, breaking up his pawn structure, but in order to activate the rook, ef, gf, attacking this pawn. If white goes g3, black can simplify further by going h4, takes rook h7, which will lead to a draw. And if white chooses not to take on f5, let's say goes king d2 instead, then black, well, has a choice. He could take on e4, but the move I really like is the move f4 here, which more or less secures the outpost on e5 for the black knight, because now it can't be challenged by a white pawn anymore. If black manages to get a knight e5 and g5 here, I don't think he's worse anymore. This position should be quite comfortable. So f5 was the way to solve all his problems. But instead, Svidler decides to play a bit more slowly to set up a fortress. Go for g5, h4, f6, arrange his pawns on the dark squares, and tell white, what are you going to do about it? Karjakin repeats moves a couple times here, like I mentioned. Svidler sets up his pawn formation. And now Karjakin, of course, has to play for win. Deviates, goes bishop d5, knight to e7. This was part of the plan, covering the c6, the c8, and the d5 square, but leaving his pieces quite passive. King to d4. Once again, Svidler has a choice to exchange some pawns here with f5, but he trusts that he can hold the position by just waiting. Goes rook to h7, bishop to e6, rook to h8, a3, rook to d8, rook to c2. Now we've reached move 40. That means Karjakin has made it to the time control, and he can start looking for a plan to break the black fortress. Rook to h8, and it's indeed not easy to break it. g3 would only make black's task easier. He takes more pawns disappear from the board, his rook gets activated, and white doesn't have much. On the queen side, there's also not much to be done. Any advances here would only lead to exchanges. There's no way to penetrate on the c file or the d5 square. But there is one weak spot in the black position, and Karjakin spots it. He goes for the move rook f2, preparing f4, which if he manages to get it in, at the very least his rook would gain a new file from where it could penetrate and cause some damage. Svidler has a tough choice if he should try to fight against f4 or allow it. Allow it, for example, by going rook h7, f4, rook g7, fg, fg. And I'm not sure about this position. White has winning chances after, let's say, rook f8, but the black fortress might very well hold. Everything's defended, and it's very hard to breach after, let's say, king c7. I'm not sure if white can make progress. More detailed analysis would be needed. I have the feeling that black should be surviving here, but it's not very pleasant, and you always have to watch out for breakthroughs with e5. So Svidler didn't want any of that. He went for the move knight to g6 instead, stopping f4, but knight g6 does have a different drawback. It loses sight of the d5 square, and of course Karjakin uses that, immediately goes king d5. Attacking the d6 pawn has to be defended by going rook to d8, and another strong move, the move bishop to f5, clearing the e6 square for his king. The king can't be allowed anywhere near e6, therefore you can't go knight e7 or knight e5. So he has to go knight f4 check, the king has to go back, but now he had to give up his waiting formation with the knight on e7, and the situation has changed a bit. White is threatening to go g3 now, and I believe this was another time to seek pawn exchanges, to play the move d5 here, make use of the current position of the rook on d8 and the knight on f4, when black still remains very much in the game. The move Peter Svidler will have disliked, and the only move to continue playing actually, is the move e5, f takes e5, king takes e5, which looks pretty scary indeed. The king can come to f6, target this pawn. The bishop should be stronger than the knight. Black does have a passed pawn and some counterplay here. With d4, he sees some space, and I haven't found anything obvious here for white. After king f6, black has to go rook g8, which looks passive, but it's not too bad. Now his king can enter the action, and it does look like black should survive this position. Some alternatives here, but let's say rook d2, king c5. I also couldn't find an obvious way forward. So this was what Svidler should have gone for, the move d5. So he went for the move rook to e8, but this is based on a miscalculation. After g3, his original intention was take, and knight to h5, targeting the g3 pawn, but he did miss the move bishop to g6 with a double attack. And after rook to h8, only move rook h2 picks up this knight on a5. So can't do that. Instead, after g3, he went for knight e6 check. More or less the only move, but knight e6 gives white a very pleasant choice between king d5, attacking this knight, followed by king takes d6, or the even more clinical bishop takes e6, which was Karjakin's choice. He was a great technician, spots the right moment here to exchange his bishop for the knight. He's rightly evaluated the upcoming rook ending. Rook takes e6, king to d5, forces the win of the d6 pawn, rook e5 check, king takes d6. White is a pawn up, which doesn't always have to mean it's the end, but here black also has the problem that his king is cut off from the action and quite passive. Therefore this endgame is pretty difficult for black. Svidler tries the logical thing, is to simplify, exchange some pawns, hg, hg, and the move g4. If you don't do that, white will just improve his position, go g4 and activate the rook in one way or the other, and black's defense would be hopeless. Therefore, Svidler had to try g4, exchanging some pawns, f takes g4, rook takes e4, but Karjakin remains very precise here. If rook takes f6, rook takes g4, things aren't that clear. White might still be winning, but this is far from easy because this pawn is a target. And if you have to defend it passively, black might have some hope. Instead, Karjakin plays a much stronger rook f4, prefers to keep the g4 pawn alive and give the g3 pawn. And the difference is after rook e3, rook takes f6, rook g3. Now the king can come to help. He goes king e5 check, discover check. Next move king f5 or king f4, supporting this g pawn, and black is lost. King to b7. I've looked at the alternatives, but they don't work either. King c7 or king c5 are just hopeless melee lines. White just captures the a6 pawn. So king b7, king to f5, supporting this guy. Black, if he wants to make anything happen, he has to grab a pawn on the queen side, but he's not quite in time. g5, rook takes b2, g6, rook g2, king to e6, and we see that black's counterplay is just too little too late. For example, a5, king f7, b4, takes, g7, b3, g8 queen, takes, and we see a typical phenomenon in these positions with the black king cut off, can't help his own pawn. Black is just lost because of the pawn advances, well, or it was gonna get picked up anyway, but here it gets picked up with rook f1, rook b1, rook b2, and there's nothing to do. Of course, the players understand that, so let's switch into the game after, I believe, the move king to e6. Here, Peter Svidler's face says it all, and he does resign. The arbiters show up, which, means that Sergei Karjakin managed to equalize the match. It's 2-2. Yet another amazing comeback by Sergei Karjakin. Can only congratulate him for his, mental toughness, his resilience, and his good technique today. Of course, here at Chess24, we are very, very sad for our friend Peter Svidler, who was so close to winning the World Cup, being up 2-0, and now he has to go through the tie breaks. The match is tied at 2-2. Tomorrow the players will play rapid games, which will determine the winner. We'll see. Karjakin has the momentum, but from the play we could tell that both sides are incredibly tired, so we shall see how it goes, who can muster the most energy for the tie breaks. And what can I say? Thank you guys for watching this video. Check out the tie breaks live on chess24.com. See you then. Bye bye.